Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2022 holiday action comedy Violent Night. Now, before I go any further, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Violent Night is one of those films that kind of came out of nowhere in 2022. I don't remember reading anything about it in terms of a potential plot synopsis or any sort of advertising until a trailer dropped. And saw the trailer, and it looked like it could be fun. I liked the cast. I like David Harbour because I'm a big fan of his character in Stranger Things, and I do enjoy John Leguizamo, and it was nice to see him have a larger role in a film again. And I just overall thought the concept of the film was fun, and it was definitely something fairly fresh. It's not really a concept that you've seen utilized that often. So it was definitely a movie that I was looking forward to. And I do have a few issues with it, but overall, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was definitely one of the better films from 2022, and I could see this on a holiday playlist during the Christmas season. This is definitely what I would call a modern gem, despite a few little flaws here and there. The film is directed by Tommy Wirkola, and prior to this, he directed films like the Dead Snow movies, Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, and those films are very tongue in cheek and over the top. So he was a good choice. He was a good choice to direct this kind of film, and he was very passionate about this. He really wanted to do this movie. As soon as he heard it was a project that was in the works, he really advocated hard for it because for some reason he felt like Santa Claus, at least this take on Santa, was something that tapped into his Danish heritage. So he felt like it was something that he had to do for his uh, his connection to the character, which is interesting. And that definitely does explain why there's just so much passion when it comes to the direction here. And I would say it's definitely right up there with some of his other work, if not better than some of his other films in his filmography, because it really does find a nice balance of over the top action, comedy, a little bit of silliness, and Christmas charm. And I think with a wrong director, with somebody who isn't really as good at handling this particular kind of tone, this could be kind of disastrous. But that wasn't the case here. And when it comes to the action scenes, he really shined. And I think that's also due to a lot of experience. I mean, his first ever film was a Kill Bill parody. So that involved a fair amount of action scenes in in that film. And of course, you got a Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, which has a lot of stylized action in it, and even some aspects of Dead Snow or Dead Snow 2. And he also has a connection with some of the people who were involved with the fight choreography and things like that. So he was able to carry that connection over, and in a lot of these action scenes, like he did do some directing, but there was a fair amount of it that was done by the choreographers themselves, and I think that definitely did create a certain sense of authenticity, a certain sense of immersion in those scenes, because you had somebody who was shooting them that knew the ins and outs of each individual uh, fight uh, sequence or movement, just to create scenes that just seemed very fluid and very seamless when it comes to the choreography. The action, when it is there, it's not overcompensating for a director's lack of skill, like you've seen with other films where there's a ton of shaky cam or quick cuts. That's not the case at all. Um, and this is really a definitive element of the film that really makes it stand out because of just how professional quality these action sequences are. These action scenes are really impressive, especially the scene in the barn where David Harbour Santa Claus is just absolutely wrecking people with a sledgehammer, cutting people's heads off with with skates, and throwing people into chippers. It's a really crazy, gonzo, wild, insane movie at times. And Wirkola really does handle and find a way to just control that craziness. And it makes it so there's a consistent tone visually throughout. He works well when it comes to the sequences that are supposed to be intense or provide a certain sense of suspense or tension, as well as sequences that are meant to be comedic or meant to just be over the top and kind of silly. And he also showcases and provides a lot of genuine talent on the screen when it comes to his ability as a director, when it comes to the sequences involving the magical elements of the movie, the Christmas magic, the visual effects sequences, the action scenes, the establishing shots. It's just a well shot film with some really choice select bits of zooms and pans and different camera techniques that are employed rather brilliantly. So I would say I think Tommy Wirkola did a wonderful job with this, and I would say that other than some of the performers and some elements of the film's script, his direction is the most consistent element of the movie. Now, the screenplay by the duo of Pat Casey and Josh Miller, it's not what I would call great. I think it's definitely missing some elements that prevent it from being a great script and a great narrative, but it's still good, and it has a fair amount of creativity and uniqueness to it. And despite some flaws, I do think it's definitely one of the better scripts when it comes to an original concept that I've seen in a while. I really love how they incorporate this Viking warrior backstory into Santa Claus. I think that's a really cool idea, and I think for the most part, the two writers execute that very well. They don't necessarily give it away super early on. They give you little glimpses of it with little flashbacks, but they don't really flesh it out fully until later on into the movie. So the flashbacks get you intrigued to see more, to see what the full backstory is. And they also explain why he's so tough and so hard to take down, and why he's able to hold his own against these terrorists in these hand-to-hand combat scenarios, because he has a little, not just a little, he has a lot of experience when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. And I like how initially when is first set to fight for his life, he's rusty. And he continues to be rusty when it comes to his fighting skills because it's been so long since he's had to tap into them. And I love how the writers utilize that for the epic action sequence in the barn where he gets the sledgehammer and then everything just clicks again. And then he's just wrecking and just destroying people with a sledgehammer and just slicing people up and stabbing people with candy canes and blowing people up with grenades. And it's just a really awesome sequence, and it's made even more epic and special because of the way that the writers build up to it. They don't do that thing where they blow their load too early, because I've seen that in other action films and in other movies where they get a good concept and a good idea going, but they give everything away, or they showcase the cool sequences or the badass moments too early on in the movie. So then the rest of the film doesn't really have the same impact and kind of pales in comparison. But that's not the case here. And I even like how even after that sequence, they don't really try to do it again or just one up it and fall flat on their face, because I've seen that before where you have this great action sequence and they try to do it again and or be better, and it just comes across like it's forced or they're trying too hard. But no, instead with the final battle between this film's version of Santa Claus and its version of Scrooge, it's a more personal, up close, back and forth tussle that is really a battle of wills more than necessarily a battle of physical prowess or a finale that's just explosive with explosions everywhere. There are some explosions, and there's a very explosive demise for Scrooge. But it's not one of those things where it feels like they're just trying to throw the kitchen sink at you. And I like that. I think sometimes a simpler, more straightforward finale can actually be a rather effective way to culminate a film's story. And there are other elements of the script that I really liked. For instance, Trudy and her connection and bond that she uh, forms with Santa Claus. I thought it was very sweet. I thought it was very charming. And Trudy even gets in on the act with some R-rated Home Alone shenanigans, which was a blast. Because honestly, I've always kind of wanted to see what an R-rated Home Alone would look like, and you get a touch and a bit of that in this film's script with a sequence of Trudy in the attic, uh, trying to fend off these two terrorists. And I like the fact that the writers even provided some nice depth to Scrooge, showed why he hated Christmas so much and why he wanted Christmas to die tonight. I actually like that. I think that was a nice touch to actually give him a backstory, to actually give him more of a motivation to go to these extreme lengths to kill Santa Claus, other than just to steal all this money. But there are some parts of the script that I just feel needed some tweaks or needed some work. For one, there's this whole generic drama with Trudy's parents where they split up and they got back together to take Trudy to this Christmas party, and they're kind of at each other's throats initially, and it it eventually resolves in a predictable fashion where they, due to the circumstances of the takeover at the holiday party, they they get back together. And it's like, okay, all right, but I feel like it just wasn't as strong as some other films that have done the same thing, cuz I didn't really buy the two being so deeply enraptured and in love with each other to begin with. At least when it comes to the time when they were together, it didn't really necessarily give you that vibe in a strong way. And the way that they were written, it was just very cliched. It was very cliched, very typical. Nothing really that out of the ordinary or unique when it comes to the approach to these characters. So it's just one of those things where you're just very indifferent on that angle of the film script. Same thing goes for the son and his contentious relationship with his siblings and his mother. Very indifferent on that as well. And even the whole plot of breaking into a vault and stealing money, like that was also pretty unoriginal, but I think it's kind of intentional because this film in a lot of ways is intended to be a satire of those over the top action films that took place on Christmas. So maybe that's an intentional sort of thing. Like it's an intentional nod to Die Hard, but it still felt very typical. And the humor in this, there are some moments where it's funny, where Santa Claus's little one-liners got a chuckle out of me, or the bits with Trudy and her talking about shoving stuff up people's anuses, or some of the other stuff with the quirky henchman, or even Scrooge and how he just went just so overboard and just over the top with his Christmas puns. But then there's other moments where the puns were groaners and it just felt like they were doing it too much, so it felt like it was overdone. And then there were other moments where there were just certain bit attempts at humor that I just didn't find funny at all, like Bertrude and the kid who's live streaming and just being an annoying twat, and his drunken mom, and the wannabe Jean-Claude Van Damme that she was dating, which that led to like one funny line from Beverly D'Angelo where she called him Jean-Claude Van Dipshit. But other than that, like I was pretty not that much into that character. And even Beverly D'Angelo's mother, she's bitchy and it's not really that likable, but it's kind of the point. But it's just one of those things where, other than Trudy and Santa Claus, like there weren't really any other characters who were on the side of good that I really liked or even loved. They were just characters that I tolerated or I was indifferent on. Other than that, the only other character I really got into was Scrooge. And I think in a lot of ways that's due to the writing. And then when it comes to the comedy as well, like it relies too much on gross out humor early on in the movie. Like it's honestly kind of a rough start with Santa Claus burping and pissing and puking. It just got really old really fast for me. And I was like, oh, is this gonna be one of those movies where Santa Claus is gonna fart and like light somebody on fire in a chimney or some shit? But no. Thankfully, it doesn't go that route, but it definitely did start that route with the farting. Well, I don't think there was farting. I was surprised that there wasn't, but there was still bodily humor, and just that's fine in small doses, but like they really relied too heavily on that when it comes to the humor in like the first 15 minutes. So it was just trying way too hard to be shocking. And then there's some other moments of cringe too, like you gave me my ho 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 back. Like, come on. And you know it was bad because you watched the deleted scenes and there were certain lines that were cut out of the movie. Like Santa saying to one of the terrorists that you're Felice Navi dead. Like, you know that they were leaning a little too hard into the Christmas puns. But, despite some issues of the script, still like it, still think it's a good screenplay, still got a nice amount of creativity to it, and it definitely does embrace the R rating. That's for damn sure. Now, the cast of this film is also, in my opinion, for the most part. Now, the cast for this film, I would say there are three standouts in particular. Of course, David Harbour as Santa Claus. I thought he did a spectacular job with this. He's a big, tall, imposing presence as it is, so it was a good casting choice. And he's got enough charisma and personality to really be the lead and really carry the film. And you could tell that he was having an absolute blast playing this version of Santa Claus. And I really did feel that he had the right mix of physical presence, physicality, as well as charm and a good heart, which I think these are all things you really needed to make this take on Santa Claus really work and connect with people. Because if you didn't have that mix or that blend, it would come across as just very fake and just not something that really resonated that strongly. But he found that nice balance and found what he needed to when it comes to this character to really make it into something that, in my opinion, was instantly iconic when it comes to a portrayal of Santa Claus. And for every good hero, you need a good villain. And I think John Leguizamo Scrooge was a good villain. You could tell that John was having a lot of fun playing a bad guy, playing this just despicable, slimy scumbag of a character. And John has enough charisma and personality himself to really make uh, a character stand out, and he definitely showed it here. It showed that he still has it, and honestly, I would love to see more. I would love to see John Leguizamo do more, have more screen time in another project or something, because I think he still has it. He definitely showed it here as Scrooge. Um, and Leah Brady as Trudy is the other standout for me. For a child actress, I thought she was amazing. I thought she was not only just cute, but she also was talented. She showed her own bit of charisma. She had really good chemistry with David Harbour. Now, Alex Hassell and Alexis Louder as Jason and Linda, just just very middle of the road performances for me. Same thing goes for like Eddie Patterson as Alva or Cam Gigadent as Morgan Steele. Beverly D'Angelo was nice to see her again, but she's not in it a ton, and her character's very one note. The other villains, like Andre Erickson as Gingerbread, or Brendan Fletcher as Krampus, or Mike Dupaud as Commander Thorpe, or Alexandra Elliott, or Mitra Suri as Candy Cane, Uh, Can Aiden as Frosty, Fong Jiang as Tinsel, Finn McKager Higgins as Jingle, Raleigh Clements Willis as Peppermint, and Stephanie Sy as Sugar Plum. You know, they're decent enough. They're fine. I would say Brendan Fletcher was the one that stood out the most when it comes to the other henchmen of Scrooge because he was just so demented and off his rocker. I would say, other than some of the stuff with David Harbour Santa Claus and some of John Leguizamo Scrooge's just twisted Christmas puns, he was the one that got the biggest laughs out of me. But the other ones are fine. You could definitely tell that they're not really actors. They were cast in the film because it was really a favor from the director, and because he had worked with them, and they were really they were stunt people. They were stunt men and stunt women who did a lot of fight choreography and fight work. So that's why they were cast in the film, is for their skills as fighters, or with on camera action, not necessarily for their acting abilities. But yeah, really, it's David Harbour's movie, and he really does shine here. He really does carry the movie, uh, and takes it pretty far. And I'm because he did such a great job with this take on Santa Claus. Like, I really do hope we get a sequel, because I really would love to see him uh, kicking all kinds of butt with that sledgehammer again. The film also features some decent enough cinematography by Matthew Weston. It's not particularly amazing. It's pretty run of the mill, but it looks good. It's definitely something that fits the film, and it's not too out of place. I feel the same way about the editing by Jim Page, although I think in some scenes some of the editing could be a little tighter, because that is one other issue with the film that I do have, is that it does have some pacing issues. I think it's because of a lot of the family drama doesn't really do that much for me, and some of the comedy that it tries to focus on, I didn't really find that funny. So the film kind of drags its feet at times, but it's still enjoyable, entertaining for the most part. There's just a couple moments where it just kind of stumbles a little bit, and it definitely does feel a little bit longer than it should. But for the most part, I think it's a fun movie. It really is. It's a fun film. I think it does a pretty good job with its concept. Considering it had a relatively low budget, would have been nice to maybe see a little bit more Christmas magic utilized in some of the action scenes, other than just the bag of presents, or using the chimney trick at the end. Um, yeah, maybe, but I'm okay with what they showcased here, because maybe they're saving stuff for another one, or maybe they just realized their budget constraints and didn't want to stretch things too far. And I honestly respect that. If that was why they decided to not go for broke when it comes to the Christmas magic and stuff like that. I mean, he definitely does use it. It definitely is utilized in the film, but it could have been maybe utilized a bit more. But for the most part, I think it's fine. It's got some good bits of action. One really spectacular action sequence in the barn, which that action sequence alone is honestly enough for me to recommend this movie to you if you haven't seen it yet. And some good performances by some of the main performers, some great direction, and good but not great script. Overall, yeah, I definitely did enjoy the film. I definitely did like it, and I really don't know what else to say about it, except thanks for watching my review, And until next time, I'll see you later.